So I could start with like introducing myself and then you can
Go for
ask
it.
me questions. I'm Kim Larson. I was on the Neighborhood Association board for St. John's. I work for a company called Luminoso. We do text analytics. And one of the things that I've been working on is enabling neighborhoods to do community studies. So we did one for St. John's. We got 800 surveys turned in. Arbor Lodge did it next. We're currently doing one with the historic Park Rose neighborhood and the surrounding areas for that. And we want to help you guys and enable you guys to do a survey. The thought behind this is I have like companies that pay my bills, but they are companies that keep their data private, which makes explaining what we do kind of difficult because we have a pretty unique technology. And so as long as the data is going back to the public, we are allowed to make that data be a free survey project for you. We tailor it to customize like the text analytics platform that we support is domain agnostic, which means we can handle any sort of language, whether that's like pet food or electronics or neighborhood studies. So we try to keep it dynamic and different. We don't want the same thing every time. And one of the big perks about Portland is we have really unique language. We have different small businesses, different streets, different organizations. So that is the basics.
I would point out, Portland has such unique neighborhoods, right? So doing one in one neighborhood doesn't cover all the neighborhoods. And I'm sure you're seeing that even more since you're doing
Yeah.
the surveys. So I think that's something for our neighborhood that we would want to think about, like, and what do we want to get out of it? So I would ask that, I think next is I kind of know from our talk before, but like kind of do a quick run over about what's in it for us. Like what would be the benefit for us to do that?
Yeah, so let's pull up some of the example surveys that or the results that we've given to other neighborhoods.
Mhm.
We can go over the questions that we've asked in these other surveys. I'm learning in each iteration. So the more times I do this
Mhm.
survey, the more I'm annoyed with how I've presented the data previously because we're improving so much each time. So this is like the lowest bar and it gets better. I promise.
Got it.
So this is the neighborhood presentation that we were going to present in March. One of the things that we do to increase survey responses is tell the community, hey, you're going to look forward to finding these results at this meeting at this time. Because often one of the things that survey people do poorly that hurts survey respondents is respondents turn in their data and they never get to see what they said, what their community said. Was I the outlier? Was I the norm? Am I with community or am I alone in this? So we want to say, nope, you're look forward to the results on March 11th, was what we did for St. John's.
Mhm.
That meeting got postponed to April because St. John's had the bottle drop news break in February.
Mhm.
And St. John's had really big feelings about the bottle drop coming into St. John's. So we kept the survey open in order to collect more feedback. And that was totally fine for our survey. The survey was designed where bottle drop really only impacted one question, but we'll go over the questions in that in a little bit. So we got more surveys submitted after this. We had questions like, why did you choose St. John's? What keeps you here? That's our strength. That is the stuff we rally around. The Neighborhood Association is chartered with improving livability. What does livability mean? We're finding out that it means different things to different neighborhoods. Um, we have some change management questions like what changes would make St. John's better? What changes would make St. John's worse? Um, and then what is St. John's missing as like a third perspective on, if things are different, is that good or is that bad? One of the things that we often point to is Portland has big feelings about police and shelters. Is this a change for better? Is this a change for worse? Are we going to is it polarizing or are we unanimously in one direction over another? This is a way to find out. And one of the most grounding questions that I really enjoy is like a recommendation question on what advice would you give to a new neighbor? Things they should try, things they should avoid. And that tells us again with a bit more dimension, like what is our neighborhood like? And if we're going to like help our community be what we want it to be, like realtors are really interested in this, politicians are really interested in this. local businesses. When we were promoting the survey, we shared some of the preliminary results with Wonderwood. And one of the things that came up in the missing question was, we're missing ice cream. We're missing a third space for kids when they graduate from swap and play. And Mike Bennett's like, I got you. He had a soft serve machine within weeks. And he's like, ice cream is now my thing. And he hung it onto his sign. It was so great. So that is there. We divided the neighborhood into sections based on natural kind of segments based on heavy road traffic. If it is troublesome to cross a busy street, people tend to stay in the quieter neighborhoods. But if there is something going on in that busy street, we have twice as many, or like two zones that are in, talking about the thing. So we have St. John's Beer Porch, this section and this section that are on either side of it, we're talking about it. But in the feeling section, you can kind of see a gradient of dissatisfaction in the different neighborhoods based on proximities to various issues.
Mm.
And then, so people, this is the, why did you choose St. John's? For us, it was affordability and proximity to different things. So we could talk about that. Affordability is huge across all neighborhoods, and how they define affordability is really interesting. And then St. John's also had the small town vibe. We like having, we like not having a Target. We like not having these big box stores.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the visualization that our platform produces. It is the, it projects the words based on how they're used in relation to each other. So affordability clustered together, proximity, small town vibe, walkability, cute. Those are words that were used together. So we can kind of form some quick themes on that. Obviously, we can find the quotes and surface. People were really putting really thoughtful answers into this because the questions we were asking were fairly novel. It wasn't, how satisfied are you with Portland? Not satisfied. Would you recommend the neighborhood? No. Okay, but give me a little bit more, right? So we defined livability in a few different ways. The clean access, clean public spaces was something that came up for us. Livability, we have proximity to amenities, access to nature, makes sense because we're people who pick St. John's, like Forest Park. The bridge is right there. We did that on purpose. Access to grocery stores, huge. We're not seeing access to downtown as a reason to pick St. John's because we don't have good access to downtown, right? That's going to be different for a different neighborhood. And so we have some examples, changes for better. We have examples. We can see some people wanting police presence and concerned about RVs and empty storefronts. That is a standard kind of expected thing for St. John's. We didn't have big surprises there. Changes for worse. This one was really interesting for us because before bottle drop was brought up in St. John's, people were like, what do you mean? What's being planned? Very suspicious. But then after people found out about the bottle drop, it really kind of grounded as like, this is a thing that people feared would make all of these things worse. So we had the foreshadowing, and then this thing, like it was ripe for the response that it got.
Let me ask you something. Go back to the 2 pages before with the little, that one. Why is there such an empty space in that upper left?
Yeah, so it's putting the concepts or the topics together. And this just shows that these were really distinct.
Okay.
So there were three groups: houseless and improvements and speed bumps were kind of closer together.
Okay.
Maybe as like people were thinking about like public solutions versus private solutions. And there
Uh-huh.
wasn't a fourth topic that was being brought up. There wasn't something more distinct than public-private.
Okay. Makes sense.
Good question. It's one of the more challenging visualizations, I think, for a lot of people to like look at and then be like, oh, this is because it's not something that really gets, I don't think anyone else has it.
Yeah, we don't do that very often. I like it. I think it does draw your eye to the key things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
So then after St. John's, a bottle drop was brought. Then we had new language like Delta Park, camping, recycling, trash, and how it would impact small businesses, how it would impact, and then you know exactly where it was going to go. In the old Dollar Tree on Lombard, that is where the concern was. It
Got
should
it.
be, people wanted it to be apartments. They wanted it to be more housing.
Mm,
Um, and people, I think this one was much longer, but I had to crop it to fit it into the slides. And what I took away from it was that like St. John's is very compassionate and stoic. So when they are in a meeting, like if they're in front of a crowd, they'll often use more direct language. And because they had the time and space to take it on their own, at like a laptop, we promoted it in different like coffee shops and bars. So we're
hmm
like, hey, if you're gonna sit down and have a drink, like take the survey, have a discussion, make an activity out of it. People added a lot of nuance and thoughtfulness because when you see your words in front of you, sometimes you're like, I could say that a bit better. And people don't have that filter when they're speaking.
hmm
Uh,
Good.
so that was this is yeah, we had some very, very thoughtful um, feedback. So advice to new neighbors, go here, do this, and watch out for this, kind of clustered together. And so the top is our local businesses, people with beer porch and grocery outlet and the food carts, Sparrow. Uh, this was generated. I did this live in a webinar for work. I was explaining the survey and I downloaded it from Google Forms, Google Sheets, and uploaded it in front of a live audience, and we could go to this immediately. So this takes minutes, not hours, days. So we can monitor the feedback as it comes in, um, and kind of share it because it is cool. Uh,
Mm,
so then we have some of the advice to new neighbors, like get to know your neighbors. Um, they'll give you ideas on how to spend your time. It'll help you in a pinch. Shop local instead of Amazon. Here's where to get your wine. Here's where to get your food. Um, Play disc golf. Like it's just great, great stuff. Um, as much as we love it here, be safe. So people they really do look out for their neighbors, right? Whether they feel super safe here or they don't, there's
mhm.
still that like, oh, I'm helping someone like me. Um, and then here's your bike route. Go along Charleston, take the wide routes. And this is really helpful because now whenever someone wants to bring up a street in St. John's, I'm like, hey, yeah, let's look it up. Let's see what people were saying about that.
Mm, hmm
Uh, and
Interesting.
then, yeah, yeah. So whatever you want to know about St. John's, let me know. Same thing with Arbor Lodge and same thing with Rose, with Historic Park Rose. Um, so this was the first thing. We can see we had a lot of people and businesses and organizations promoting the survey. So it is collaborative. If it just comes from the neighborhood association, there's going to be a self-selection bias in the data.
hmm
Do prefer to avoid that because we want to get everybody's data. So we had our or everybody's feedback and stories. Um, so we had ours open from November through April. We had it open for 5 months.
5 months.
So to give people a chance to warm up to it, right? To show that
Mhm.
are we getting responses from where we want them? Are we making sure that we have people who've been here? One of the questions we ask is like, how long have you been here?
Mhm.
Do you know the neighborhood as it is today? So like 1 year span, 1 to 5 years, I think 5 to 15, and then 15 plus. One of the folks in the what is missing section said like, we need an arcade where the old Blockbuster used to be. Where did the old, we know Blockbuster, where was the old Blockbuster?
Yeah.
So that took some investigating, be like, where is that? And like, yeah, that place has been, I think, storage over by a Safeway since Blockbuster was a thing, which is
Wow.
impressive. Um, and then when we actually did get to share it in April, the presentation got a little bit better. One of the things that we have is a motion distribution image, and this one looks better. Let me find oh goodness, is it the mood meter? Mood meter. Okay. So this is the visualization that we give to people now. So there's two questions. One is on how do you feel about the neighborhood? There's a pleasantness scale, comfortable, uncomfortable, low energy, high energy, and it gives some coordinates. Like, are you happy with the neighborhood? Are you secure? Are you sad? And what we're looking for is um, not just angry and happy, right?
Hmm.
Because when we take surveys, sometimes in the accusations, it's like, well, the only people who take surveys are people who love it or hate it. This
Got it.
allows us to make sure that that is not the case. And we're getting people who feel comfy. Like they're at the bar, they're happy, but they're bored and they want to do something. And they're like, oh, this is fun. And we had some people who were very sad. So we've updated the image of that so that where is there's the April results. We had, I think 54% were in this like pretty happy box.
Hmm.
We had people who identified as feeling in despair, people who were mad, which is impressive because these are fairly stigmatized emotions,
Hmm.
right? Like some people, there aren't like, they're not okay. They are okay always. And
Hmm.
this allowed them to have some space to be like, no, 50, about what that means 46% of people were outside of this box.
Hmm.
Um, so then we have a question about connection. So one of my hypotheses is that connection displaces fear, right? So if you're alone and there's all these strangers walking in front of your house, um, there's gonna be more fear than if you're like, oh, that's Mike, that's Flip, that's Reef, that's like those are my friends. I feel safer because we know each other, right? So we want to say like, how connected are you? Where do you find connection? We find connections lots of places. We find it at the store, we find it at coffee shops, events, because we have that big jazz festival, we have the farmers market, volunteering. People feel really connected with that. One of the interesting things that we found was block parties. In St. John's, they're associated with people who feel less connected. The party comes to them and they're like, okay, that is block parties are where I find connection. For Arbor Lodge, it was the opposite. I think it's because they have less of a focus on organizing block parties. So the people who are volunteering are organizing the block parties and they feel more connected anyway. So that was an interesting difference that we had, because Arbor Lodge and St. John's are very close to each other. We just have different cultures. Um, so this was interesting to see
Interesting. Hmm.
how connected people feel. Um, we had how strongly do you recommend the neighborhood? People who are like everyone who has a place here, mentioning the park, the farmers market, biking, dogs, outside people. And the folks who said stay away from St. John's talked about broken windows, being aware
I
of
was
your surroundings, get camera.
wondering what Windows was. I'm like, what? Okay, so that makes sense. Broke.
Yep,
Okay, got
broken
it.
windows,
Was that business focused? Was that more
cars,
response? Oh,
cars.
cars. Got it. Okay, got it. Got it. Yep. Okay.
Um,
Mm. Okay.
and yeah, things about like don't leave anything in your car, don't leave
Hmm.
anything on your porch, that kind of stuff. So it was interesting. And to see like where the x-axis here is like how many people mentioned those things.
Hmm.
And remembering that these are open-ended essay answers.
Hmm.
It wasn't like a pick list because that would have been exhausting. Uh, so
Yeah.
people gave really detailed advice there. Um, we have these emotion questions. We fixed this in the park rows, so it's only positive, negative. It's not the four quadrants of feelings. But we evaluate different dimensions on like safety, livability, walkability, public transit, schools. How do we feel about these things? Um, Changes for the better. I think this is pretty similar to the last one. We had a question about would you spend more or less time downtown if there was more or less car traffic on Lombard?
Mm.
A lot of people said, like, yeah, less car traffic would spend more time there. But there were some people who said, no, I would spend less time there. And they associated it with there not there being like decreased public presence. And they thought that there would be more unhoused, unsupervised concerns. They're like, nope, that makes it too scary. The cars make me feel safe.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Interesting indeed, right? There
Huh.
wasn't a lot of that, but it was a distinct concern, right? Like I would spend
Yeah.
less time because we
Hmm.
wouldn't have these things.
Interesting.
hmm what's missing? There was a consistent theme. They're like, no more pizza and bars. We have enough pizza and bars. And it showed up enough.
That's funny.
It was.
That's very funny. Is there any pulling out? Like one of the things I've been thinking about in our neighborhood was how to engage renters more. Was there any
Yes. Yeah, yeah.
thought on that?
So that is one that I think all the neighborhoods are having a challenge with.
Hmm.
In Arbor Lodge, it was the most distinct because um, the apartment complexes are right along interstate, right? And so it's the homeowners that show up at the neighborhood association.
Right.
And so I think if you have some distinct apartment buildings,
Hmm.
work with the managers because they can recognize like property managers. They often organize apartment events. I remember when I lived in the apartments, there's like social hours, happy hours, monthly community emails because they're trying to work on resident retention.
Hmm. Yep.
And so if you can identify like, hey, can you promote this survey in your apartment elevator or in your monthly newsletter and have that be repeated to say like, hey, your opinion matters? Because I think renters often self-disqualify because they don't feel connected to the neighborhood.
Right.
And you want to say like, well, we want you to be connected.
Hmm.
Your opinion matters to us, even if you're only here for 6 months, right? We still want to hear what your experience is because it's different than ours. Um, Property managers should be able to identify that that would result in like less churn of residents.
Yeah.
But they are, yes, a harder demographic to get feedback from.
And did it show up in the
Yeah.
results in any way, or you just
Yeah.
kept it? You
Yeah,
know what I
we
mean?
we could tell that it was one of the skews because the response of folks who were there for 12 months or fewer was a
Oh,
super small slice. We did not get a
got
lot of new residents, and Arbor Lodge even
it.
less. Um, so we're trying to fix that with the Park Rose iteration.
Mhm.
But I think they they're having a harder time getting feedback because they don't have that small town feel.
Yeah.
I think that was a huge advantage for St. John's.
Hmm.
Uh, we also had a ton of because I was doing the St. John one, so I was like, I'm gonna make this work.
Hmm.
So I like we put up a lot of signs around. I'm gonna pull up the website real quick. Um, Loading. Okay. So this is the my our company website. And I get to edit it. So if there's any questions, you're like, hey, this belongs on there. I can update it and put it up here. We worked with Frog Fairy because what was missing, Frog Fairy was identified as missing. So we collected
Hmm.
some stories and made a video with them.
I saw that. It was good. I watched it.
Um, so yeah, so here's some examples. You can see
Hmm.
I work in data, text analytics. I'm not a graphic designer. So my first survey was here with a big QR code and small Spanish text, not helpful.
Yeah.
But having a flyer that was posted in restaurants that had a question like, do you have friends in St. John's? Take the
Mhm.
survey. Give a shout out. So the shout out section was particularly helpful because then we could go back to the people who promoted the survey and say, hey, Mosaic, this is what your people who love you said, people who like
Mhm.
gave you the shout out. Hey, Daydreamer. Hey, Boosters. Hey,
Mhm.
whoever. This is what your following is saying. Um, and then yeah, here's like however you spend time, here's the results at 7 p.m. Um, English and Spanish. And we did an event with First Door PDX. So First Door PDX put together a survey night. So they work
Oh,
in
I
the
see.
high density apartments by Pier Park. So there's thousands of apartment residents there. And there was like a raffle night. So if you take a survey, you get a bingo card. And if you win bingo, there were gift cards to grocery stores, restaurants,
Hmm.
um, movie night bag. Like it was just a cute thing. So between the library and the neighborhood study, people could have two bingo cards. Um, and that helped us reach out to the apartments a bit better.
Hmm.
And we also had technology assistance because not everyone who lived in the apartments was tech comfortable. So we had volunteers assisting and doing the transcribing. One woman that I did the survey with, why did you move to St. John? She's like, well, I used to live on Fessenden, and then the shelter got me housing here. My kids go to school here, and now I never want to leave. That's the stories that we wanted, right? Because
Yeah.
when she lived on Fessenden, that was a literal lived on Fessenden.
Oh, got it. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting, right?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And that resulted when we looked at that emotion grid, she was like, I love it here.
Yeah.
And I think it's because in customer experience, we talk about how the satisfaction formula is experience over expectations or past experiences. And because her past experiences were um, kind of rough. They were what they were.
Hmm.
What she was experiencing in these apartments that generally people were like, no, I don't want to live in those apartments. Like there's too much going on there. She's like, no, this works.
Way better. Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I think the Pier Park neighborhood tended to have more positive scores. They also have access to green space in the park. It's super accessible. Um, the school's right, Sitton Elementary is right there. There's a lot of good things in that neighborhood, even if the income bracket isn't what it is over by Cathedral.
Hmm.
Um,
Interesting. Let's do this because I think I'll probably get about 30 minutes at the thing. So let's just before we close the video,
mhm,
um, recap briefly. So to do the survey, you basically posted it everywhere, engaged local businesses, engaged any groups, any activity groups that you could pull up, like think outside the box. And who did that? Like who actually did all that? Because that's a good question because someone's going to have to do it if we want.
it takes someone very invested in it. The
Okay.
more I did the best I could to diversify the number of stakeholders that I could.
Hmm.
Um, Mike Vile is a lawyer that lives near the bottle drop location. So once the bottle
Hmm.
drop news broke, he was a very strong advocate for the survey that allowed us to kind of siphon a lot of the community feedback. Um, I for St. John's, I did a lot of the footwork.
Okay.
For Arbor Lodge, Kevin did the footwork, and Sexy Coffee is a coffee shop that had a lot of like I think promotion. Daydreamer did a lot of promotion for us.
Okay.
So it is kind of
Businesses. Hmm.
yeah, businesses did
You
it,
put stuff up, had the
flyers
QR code, all
everywhere.
that jazz.
Yeah,
Okay. And
yeah.
then I think I got a kind of got a grip on that. It makes sense. And then so it's going to take some engagement by somebody or at least a small group of people to get it to happen.
Yeah. And
And
it
we,
it's
we can hit that.
helpful. It's helpful if you can like identify like the small businesses. We went to every small business in St. John's and
Hmm.
explained to them what we were trying to accomplish, what they could get out of it, so that we could put a flyer up. So when people
Yeah,
lived in St. John's, they saw the flyer everywhere. They saw it in the stores, on the streets, in the
hmm.
bathrooms, like it was
It's
everywhere.
everywhere. No, it's cool. And then ultimately, just as a short recap, on so what's in it like if we promote this as a neighborhood association,
Mhm.
what's in it for us and why would we
Yeah.
want to do it?
Yeah. So one of the things that St. John's Neighborhood Association is trying to overcome, or at least I wanted it to overcome, was this perception that there was that it's a rogue org, right? There was a Safe Rest Village being built downtown, and we had what was like the coup board, where they were like, forget what the neighborhood says, we're opposed to it, we're in charge, we're gonna fight this.
Mm,
And so St. John's is trying to figure out, well, no, we want to represent the community. We have to
hmm.
understand the community first. Um,
Right.
and so this is a way to show the neighborhood that you respect their opinions. It's a way to make sure that you are correct because the people who speak up in meetings are not necessarily everybody.
Right.
Um, and like one of the things that I'm noticing, I'm not on the neighborhood association board anymore because now I have class. I have
Right.
school Monday and Wednesday night. We have our neighborhood meetings Monday and we have our like board meeting Wednesday. I'm out of the board until, or I'm out of say, like the neighborhood association, at least until I can finish school.
Right.
So how do I get my feedback into the narrative? A survey would be required.
Yeah. Well, my comment always is, I've brought this up around the TAS and the
Mhm,
lack of the county and the city to actually, they didn't know how many homeless people we even had. So how are you going to improve it, right? And they're
mhm,
finally getting that together. So from a neighborhood perspective, it's like, so how do we make any improvements? How do we engage people? We
mhm.
don't know unless we find out some data first. So this, to
Yeah.
me, this is like a starting point to
Mhm.
then do other things with the data,
And we do
massage
want
it
to
however we want.
customize it to your
Yes.
neighborhood. So for St. John's, it was about more or less traffic on Lombard. For Arbor
Mhm.
Lodge, I forget what theirs is. Park Rose is doing street lighting. If there was more lighting, how would that change behavior? So if you have a specific targeted question that you want that resonates, that is within your
Mhm.
scope of like, if it's like trying to connect people to services. Do you know who to contact or how
Yeah.
big of an issue? We're helping Do Good Multnomah. We're also helping them for free because we're trying to like, help them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
and
have you guys talked to the city at all or the county yet about it's probably the county actually. So one thing that's brand new news for us in hand is that the deflection center, the large and new deflection center is going to be
this,
placed in our neighborhood.
yeah, the
Um,
sobriety. Yeah,
yes.
saw
So
that.
that was just announced. So I think that is a good timing. It's kind of
Mhm.
like your bottle drop situation. It's kind of the same.
Yep.
I don't know how many. I mean, it's getting well publicized, so I think it's going to become a big talking point and probably bring people back
It hit
to,
my news feed, and I'm not on social media. It just came up
yeah.
in my news.
So
Uh,
anyway, that comes to mind for me. So
One of the things that came up in the St. John's and Arbor Lodge data that we fixed for Park Rose was demographic representation. So people wanted to know the likelihood of it being ethnically, gender, income diverse, because things like Prosper Portland have grants that are tied to the
mm,
feedback of marginalized communities. But we didn't ask those in St. John's or in Arbor Lodge because there is some sensitivity to that. And we're seeing that in the Park Rose neighborhood, but we
yeah.
are asking it in Park Rose. So you can choose whether or not you want to include it in your surveys. There's the emotion grid that we talked about
Mhm.
and how we present it to people. Um, Positive, negative, scroll. So at in the front of the survey, we ask people based on these geography zones. Are you in Maywood
Can't see
Park?
it. Are you trying to show it?
Oh, I am.
Go
Yes,
ahead. I thought you
I
might be.
can fix that. Good
That's
call.
okay. There you go.
So
Hmm.
we start the survey with saying, this is what we're going to cover. Also, sign up for the newsletter. Keep it easy. Which part of the neighborhood are you in? Um, we have a whole bunch of sections. We expanded beyond just Park Rose for this because what we saw in St. John's is that people may live on the border in another neighborhood,
Hmm.
but they identify with St. John's. They school
Mm.
in St. John's, they shop in St. John's, and we wanted to be able to give them a place to have their feedback
Hmm.
if they're not the target audience. And that way, if we do the neighborhood study for Maywood Park or we do it for Lewitt, um, we can compare like what did the Lewitt people say in the Park Rose data? What did the Park Rose people say in the Lewitt data?
Got it.
So we wanted to give people an option to self-express. So this does not align with the census data. The census is designed to be monolithic by nature. So they have some weird geography lines that don't make sense geographically. So at the end of the survey, we're like, here's the weird
Oh.
geographical tracks, right?
Hmm.
Because this section is demographically more monolithic along this like stretch along the highway and railroad tracks. So how do we show that it is
Hmm.
demographically representative when like these are also too big for neighborhood cultural appropriate studies, right?
Right.
The issues up here are going to be different than the issues over here, and over
Hmm.
here are different than here. Uh,
Right. Very much in ours too. Same. We have similar.
yeah, so we included both. This is at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Because sunk cost fallacy, people are like, oh, I took all the survey already. I don't want to lose what I said. So I'll get through this easy stuff at the end. And they
Yeah.
finish the survey. Um, we have the gender question. We have race and ethnicity question. Languages we speak at home.
Mm.
Luminoso can do, I think we have 14 languages that we process. But for
Mm.
this survey, we're only hosting it in English
Mm-hmm.
because from an analytics perspective, like we don't know what languages we need to support until next year. So people are telling us, like how much is Russian? How much is Somali? How much is Tagalog?
Right.
Uh,
Right.
and this will help us prepare to be more inclusive next time.
Right.
Um, Education level, this is what we do in lieu of income,
Mm-hmm.
because education and income are highly correlated. And we can say, courtesy of my mother, I was testing this survey on her, and she's like, I always have my income in surveys because it's none of their business. And I was like,
Yeah.
Mom,
That's true. A lot of people do. I mean, I think most people go low rather than high, I would guess. So, I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense actually.
yeah,
And it's less. So, did you find that most people answered those demographic questions? Did you have good, like, did people stop or did you get a pretty good
people
overall
are
response?
still taking it. So we have 88 responses,
Ah, okay.
and 87 of them answered the languages spoken at home.
Oh, that's really good.
That's
So
really
87,
good.
heck yeah. Okay, well, that's pretty good. And what about education level? Can you tell that one too?
Yeah.
You're just getting,
Yeah, it's very educated.
oh, 88.
Associate.
Oh, nice. Okay, perfect. Yeah, that's nice. You can pull that out. Okay,
Mhm.
perfect. Cool.
Um, yeah, we had some funny.
Look at the answer here.
I
Pronouns
love.
name is nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, good
So,
grief. Yeah, of course you're going to get that. How many responses are here? Let's see that one, the gender one, just out of curiosity. 87.
yeah,
It's still high. Okay, fair enough. Well, they prefer not to say, but whatever. It doesn't matter. That's still a
but and that is an option, right? They don't have to skip it because they said they didn't want to.
right. I
Um,
like that's perfect. Oh, you guys have thought well through this. Okay,
we did a
excellent.
webinar on demographic information. I just posted it on our YouTube page recently. But this, I've been very impressed by it. And I often look for these dissenting perspectives because it
Hmm.
shows that our feedback is not coming through an echo chamber. There was someone in the St. John survey who's like, something he missed the days he was born in 75, and he missed the days when cops could just beat people up, and he didn't like the neighborhood yuppies something. I'm like, thank you for taking the survey. That I'm so proud of you for taking the
Yeah. No,
survey.
for reals, to actually get
Yeah,
that kind of feedback. I mean, most
yeah.
people, well, I don't know.
He
Yeah, that
feedback
might
made
be
me awesome.
more, people might be doing that more now just because of our climate of, well,
And
I
this
can
was
say
a year
whatever I
ago.
want. Still, it's been
Yeah,
about 10 years now, 8 to
yeah.
10. So there's that. But
Um,
that's interesting, huh? Well, very good.
so we do look for that data to show that it's not just things we agree with, right? We try to
Right.
keep things as neutral as possible. This is the advice section. Like,
Hmm.
wow, look at all these words.
Yeah, people really wrote a lot. It's very
Yeah.
encouraging to see that. So
Mhm.
and I think the engagement side of that would make all the difference, like
Yeah.
getting in front of people and
And
okay,
status
cool.
updates like, hey, the survey's been open for a month. This is what the advice to new neighbor says.
Hmm.
Is it representative for you? Do you want to take it? Show that we're taking the feedback seriously.
Oh, you guys actually did that. Okay, that's really
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah, survey updates as frequently as you're communicating. Be like, hey,
Hmm.
we're at 88%. We're at 88 responses. We're 10% towards our goal. Remind your
Hmm.
neighbor to take the survey. Um, that can go a long way.
That's perfect.